There are moments in life that quietly divide everything into before and after. Sometimes that moment is captured in a single image, one photograph, powerful enough to make the entire world seem topaz and hold its breath. On Tuesday evening, November 18, 2025, gospel singer Angie Clark shared one such image on Instagram. And that single post would go on to break hearts all across America. There was no long caption explaining what had happened, no dramatic explanation, and no plea for attention. Instead, the photo showed an open Bible turned to Psalm 23. Resting gently on the worn pages was a simple gold wedding band, and beneath it were just 3 words. Words so heavy, they sent shock waves through Nashville within minutes. Please pray for us. That almost instantly the gospel music industry came to a standstill. Prayer chains formed in churches, homes, and communities across all 50 states. People stopped what they were doing and bowed their heads because when Angie Penrod Clark asks for prayer, it is understood that something is devastatingly wrong. This is the story of one of gospel music's most faithful and admired families. And the heartbreak none of them ever imagined would come. But to understand how it ends, you first have to understand how it began. Their ending only makes sense once you truly know who Guy and Angie were from the very start. Most people know Guy Penrod as the towering figure with the impossibly deep resonant voice. The man who spent 14 years as the steady anchor of the Gaither Vocal Band. He was the singer who could bring 30,000 people to tears with a single line of "Then Came a Morning." His voice didn't just echo through arenas. It reached deep into people's souls. Yet what the cameras never showed was the woman who sat faithfully in the front row of every single concert for more than 40 years. Her name was Angie Clark. She wasn't there out of obligation or duty. She was there because she wanted to be. To her, there was no better seat in the world. Watching her husband lead thousands of people to Jesus meant more to her than any Broadway show or symphony performance. Evoca Guy and Angie met in 1983 at a small Christian college. Guy was studying music, while Angie was pursuing a degree in education. Their first real conversation happened in a campus coffee shop. Guy was nervously rehearsing for an audition when Angie walked by, stopped, and spoke 5 simple words that would change both of their lives forever. "You're singing to the wrong audience." Confused, Guy looked up at her. She smiled and explained, "You're singing like you're trying to impress people. Sing like you're talking to God." 2 years later, in 1985, they were married. From that moment on, they were never apart for more than 3 nights at a time. Not once in 40 years. What many people don't realize is that the Penrod family wasn't built in a massive Nashville mansion filled with nannies, luxury, and private tutors. Instead, it was built on a tour bus rolling mile by mile through the American heartland. They had 8 children, 7 boys who looked just like their father, and then Sarah, a daughter who arrived when everyone thought their family was complete. Those children didn't grow up with separate bedrooms, personal screens, or endless privacy. They slept in bunk beds stacked 3 high, learned to harmonize because it was either that or listened to their brothers snore, and grew up surrounded by music. Out every night after a concert. While Guy stayed outside shaking hands and signing autographs, Angie gathered all 8 children in the back of the bus. Together they sang not for an audience, not for applause, but simply because that was what Penrods did. They sang the old hymns, "Amazing Grace," "How Great Thou Art," and "It Is Swell with My Soul." And here is the detail that later breaks the heart. Guy always made them sing every single verse. "Never skip a verse," he would say. "Every word matters when you're singing to the Lord." By the early 2000s, when they finally settled on a farm outside Nashville, those children could harmonize in their sleep. Sundays meant church, no exceptions, even if they had driven all night to get home. Mondays meant family dinner around a kitchen table built for 10 people. Guy sat at head, Angie at the foot, and no phones were allowed. That time was sacred. The gospel community often referred to them as the perfect from unbreakable, faithful, and a living testimony to what commitment and belief could build. But what people rarely admit about perfect families is this: the higher the climb, the harder the fall. The warning signs began quietly, almost invisibly. In the summer of 2025, for the first time in his entire career, Guy Penrod led 3 consecutive weekend concerts. The official explanation was vocal rest, which made sense. After 40 years of singing, anyone would understand the need for a break, but those closest to him noticed something else. Guy looked thinner, not the healthy kind that comes from exercise and discipline, but the kind that suggests something is wrong deep inside. His eyes carried an exhaustion that sleep could not fix. Around the same time, Angie's weekly Facebook videos, once she had faithfully posted every Monday for years, began getting shorter. 5 minutes became 3. 3 minutes became 90 seconds. And if you watched very closely, you could see it. Her smile took just a fraction of a second longer to reach her eyes. In August, they drove their youngest daughter, Sarah, to college for her freshman year. It should have been a bittersweet milestone filled with photos, hugs, and promises to call home every Sunday. Instead, Guy had toppled over twice during the 4-hour drive home because his stomach hurt so badly he couldn't sit upright. Angie, ever the optimist, insisted it was stress, just life catching up with them, just age. After all, they were both in their 50s now, and bodies don't work the way they did at 25. Still, to be safe, she scheduled the doctor's appointment. The blood work in October was supposed to be routine. October 14, 2025 began like any other Tuesday. Guy woke up early, ate a light breakfast of oatmeal and coffee, kissed Angie goodbye, and drove himself to the clinic. Angie stayed home, planning to handle correspondence, maybe record her weekly video, or simply enjoy the quiet morning. They had been married long enough that silence between them felt peaceful. He was supposed to go home by lunch. Instead, at noon, the phone rang. It was the doctor, and he asked them both to come back immediately. Angie's stomach dropped. "Doctor, don't use the word immediately, unless something is terribly wrong." They drove back together in complete silence, holding hands across the center console the entire way. The doctor's office was small and cramped, decorated with generic landscape paintings. A box of tissues sat on the desk already. That's when they heard the 3 words that would redefine the rest of their lives. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. The doctor continued talking about the liver being involved, about surgery not being an option, about treatment possibly extending life by 3 to 6 months at best, and far less without it. Angie later said the room began to spin, and all she could hear was a high-pitched ringing. A guy, in the most Guy Penrod way imaginable, reached over, took her hand, and squeezed it gently. In that same deep, steady voice that had comforted millions, he said, "Well, honey, I guess we're going home to Jesus sooner than we planned." Then he asked the doctor a question that stunned him. Could he keep singing until the very end? The doctor later admitted he had never been asked that by a terminal patient. He said yes as long as Guy's body allowed it. Guy nodded, stood up and said, he said, his voice steady, even as tears streamed down his face, "I'm not afraid to meet the Lord. I've been singing about heaven my whole life. I know where I'm going, but I am afraid of leaving you kids and your mama." That's when Angie stood up. That's quiet, reserved woman, who had spent 40 years supporting her husband from behind the scenes, suddenly became the strongest person in the room. "We are going to love each other harder than this cancer can hurt us," she said firmly. "We're going to fill every single day with music, laughter, and Jesus. That's who your daddy is. That's who we are, and we are not going to waste 1 second being afraid." They kept the diagnosis private for 5 weeks. Only close friends and family knew. The rest of the gospel community wondered why Guy wasn't booking concerts and why Angie's videos had stopped. Inside their home, They prayed constantly. They sang together every evening, even as Guy's voice weakened. They cooked meals, shared old stories, flipped through photo albums, and tried to fit 40 more years of memories into just a few precious weeks. By mid-November, Angie knew it was time to tell the world. Not for attention or sympathy, but because Guy's life had been public and his passing deserved to be shared with those who had loved him through his music. On November 18th, she opened her Bible to Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." She removed her wedding ring, the same simple gold band Guy had placed in her finger 40 years earlier, and set it gently on the page. She took a photo, typed 3 words, "Please pray for us," and posted it to Instagram and Facebook. Then she put her phone down and walked away. She didn't read the comments. She didn't watch the shares multiply. She went back to the living room, sat beside Guy and held his hand. Within minutes, every phone in Nashville began ringing. Bill Gaither, the legendary producer who had given Guy his big break decades earlier, called immediately. He was crying so intensely that forming words felt almost impossible. Through broken breaths and tears, he kept asking the same desperate questions over and over again. "What can I do? And what do you need?" His heart was searching for something, anything that might help ease the pain he was feeling. Around the same time, the Isaacs, another well-known gospel family, shared a video of themselves singing through tears. They offered no explanation because none was necessary. Anyone who belonged to the gospel community already understood exactly why they were grieving. Soon, churches stretching from Ohio all the way to Texas began organizing all-night prayer vigils. Sanctuaries stayed lit while people knelt, sang, and prayed through the darkness. At the Penrod family farm, packages started, arriving from complete strangers. Quilts, handwritten letters, and recorded videos poured in daily. Each one carried a story. People shared how Guy's voice had once guided them toward the Lord, how his music had rescued marriages on the brink of collapse, and how his testimony had drawn them back from the edge of suicide, addiction, or divorce. One woman wrote a letter that stood out among the rest. She said that 20 years earlier, she had been moments away from ending her life when she heard Guy sing. Then came the morning on the radio. In that instant, she realized that if morning could come after the darkest night in human history, then it could also come for her. That single song gave her hope when she had none. Stories like hers surrounded the Penrod family with a kind of grief that was deeply personal yet unimaginably vast. Guy Penrod had touched millions of lives, and now millions of people were mourning alongside them. But this is where the history takes a turn that no one expected. Guy made a choice that would come to define his final weeks. Every evening without fail, even when pain medication caused his hands to tremble, he would pick up his old acoustic guitar. Slowly, he would walk out to the front porch, settle into his favorite rocking chair, and begin to sing whatever him rested on his heart that night. That was the song he offered. Each evening, Tyler or one of the other boys would set up a phone on a tripod and stream it live on Facebook. They called these moments porch nights. There was no elaborate setup and no polished production. Was simply a dying man, his guitar, and the songs that had shaped his entire life. At first, thousands of people tuned in. Soon those numbers grew into the hundreds of thousands. Then about 10 days before his passing, Guy began singing the song, "I'll know I'll see you again." He made it through the first verse without trouble. But when he raked the chorus, when he sang the line, "Knowing you'll be there," he looked straight at Angie, who was sitting just out of frame, and his voice failed him. He couldn't continue. His words broke apart as tears streamed down his face. Angie stood up, walked over and wrapped her arms around him, and together they wept. Tyler stepped in and gently picked up the verse where his father had stopped. Then Jesse joined his voice. Then Logan followed. Soon all 8 children were standing on that porch singing the song their father could no longer finish. Guy and Angie clung to each other, crying as their children carried the melody forward. That video has now been viewed more than 20